when Drake took to Instagram, calmly urging his fans to end the hate and stop fueling the chaos around his lawsuit. It was supposed to be the olive branch, the peace sign that finally ended months of drama between him, Kendrick Lamar, and the rest of the rap world. But instead of cooling things down, his words detonated like a match dropped in a pool of gasoline. Within hours, social media turned his apology into a meme factory. The same fans he tried to calm were dissecting every word, questioning his motives, and turning what should have been damage control into a PR disaster. Drake has always been the master of emotional control. The artist who can turn heartbreak and controversy into chart toppers. But this time, his message felt different. Too polished, too rehearsed. In a culture that values rawness and authenticity, his apology came off as strategic rather than sincere. And when the judge officially dismissed his lawsuit against Universal Music Group, it's the same label he once trusted. The internet's verdict was unanimous. Drake didn't just lose in court, he lost the crowd. In this episode, we're breaking down how one post flipped the narrative. Why did a simple plea for peace make things worse? How did the biggest rapper of a generation end up looking powerless in his own story? We'll dive into the psychology of public apologies, the fan loyalty that turned toxic, and how this moment could redefine Drake's relationship with his audience forever. Because in the age of virality, sometimes saying sorry isn't enough, especially when your empire is built on never backing down. Drake's apology was supposed to be the olive branch, the peace offering, the grown man move in the middle of a storm he helped stir up, but instead it did the opposite. It poured gasoline on a fire that was already threatening to burn everything down. Fans were waiting for humility. Critics were waiting for accountability. But what they got, a masterclass in deflection, egoshing, and tone-deaf timing. And once the apology dropped, people didn't calm down. They got louder, angrier, and more united in their disappointment. Let's be real, Drake isn't new to controversy. He's danced through beefs, snuck disses and hooks, and dropped more subliminals than a shady group chat. But this time was different. This time, the receipts were out. People were watching closely. And instead of owning the moment, instead of sitting with the L like a man and learning from it, Drake tried to finesse his way out. Except the finesse didn't land. It flopped. And when a finesse flops, it's worse than the offense. The apology read like it was crafted in a boardroom. Not a diary. There was no heart, no bruises, no dirt under the nails, just polished words wrapped in PR glitter. It felt like someone trying to hold on to an image, not someone genuinely trying to make things right. He didn't speak to the people he heard. He spoke at them. And that's where the disconnect began. Because fans don't just want bars and beats anymore. They want soul. They want truth. They want vulnerability that doesn't come with a filter. Social media clocked it immediately. The second the statement went live, timelines exploded. Not with relief, but with rage. Screenshots, quote tweets, think pieces, reaction videos, it all came at once. Some called it performative. Others said it was manipulative. A few even said it was gaslighting in a tuxedo. And you know what? It's hard to argue, because if you say sorry but still center yourself, are you really sorry or are you just trying to save face? The real kicker, he never really addressed the heart of the controversy. He danced around it, tiptoed through the storm, never naming names, never confronting the real issue head-on. And in today's world, that's not just weak. It's offensive. If you're going to apologize, you better look the problem in the eye and say its name. Otherwise, you're not apologizing. You're just spinning. And the spin was dizzying. There were lines in that apology that felt more like lyrics than accountability. Metaphors where clarity should have been. Half-truths where there should have been transparency. It was like watching someone try to freestyle their way out of a courtroom. Cool on a mixtape. Cringe in real life. Because when people are hurting, they don't want poetry. They want honesty. They want to know you see them, not just the optics. What made it worse was the timing. It didn't come when the heat was highest. It came when the noise was starting to cool. Almost like he thought people had moved on and he could slide in a half-hearted apology to check the box. But people hadn't moved on. They were just watching, waiting. And when the apology finally came, didn't feel like remorse. It felt like strategy. And that's the Drake paradox. He's one of the most strategic artists of our time. He knows how to move. He knows when to drop, when to disappear, when to respond. But that same instinct for control can backfire when people just want you to be human. You can't out-strategize sincerity. You can't brand your way out of being wrong. And the more people felt the apology was calculated, the more they rejected it. Then came the responses. Other artists started speaking up. Not directly, but enough to feel the shade. Industry insiders leaked their own thoughts. People who usually stay neutral started picking sides. It was like a shift happened. A crack in the Drake armor. For the first time in a long time, he looked not just vulnerable, but out of touch. And honestly, this didn't have to happen. If he'd just come out, owned everything, named names, and admitted fault with no conditions, he might have won people back. Maybe not all of them, but enough to shift the energy because people forgive. They just want to believe the apology is for them, not for the cameras. But instead, he went the route to many celebs take, the route of curated remorse. The route of "I'm sorry you felt that way" instead of "I'm sorry I messed up." And that tiny shift in language, it changes everything. It's wild because Drake's entire brand is emotional intelligence. He built his empire off of feelings, introspection, the art of being in tune. But this was disconnected, detached, like he missed the memo. People aren't here for a celebrity immunity anymore. They want real, they want raw. They want growth in public, not just music about it. And if you're not ready to meet that moment, then you're not just losing fans, you're losing relevance because clout fades. Hits fade. But how you show up when it matters, that stays. The apology didn't just fail, ignited a whole new wave of criticism. It brought new voices into the conversation. People who had stayed silent before suddenly had something to say because the apology reminded them that the system still rewards those who do the bare minimum as long as they're famous enough. And that rubbed people the wrong way. You can feel the shift, the trust broken, the narrative changed. And now every move he makes is being watched through a different lens. Not as the golden boy of hip-hop, but as someone who might have lost the plot. The question isn't can he bounce back? It's does he even get it? Because if he doesn't, the apology won't be the end of this. It'll be the start of a slow fall. Not a dramatic crash, but a quiet erosion of the empire. One tone-deaf post at a time. One shallow statement after another. One missed moment of accountability that could have saved it all. And that's what makes this whole thing so wild. It didn't have to be this way. But when pride gets louder than humility, the apology becomes a punchline. And when you're the one who lit the match, you don't get to act surprised when the fire spreads. The more you unpack it, the more you see that the apology wasn't just bad timing. It was the wrong message at the wrong moment from the wrong place. When someone you've looked up to for authenticity suddenly delivers a performance of remorse instead of the real thing, the disillusionment hits harder than the original mistake. Fans aren't simply judging the misstep anymore. They're judging the recovery. And when the recovery comes off as tone-deaf, the damage compounds. Think about it. The apology came after months of momentum. The spotlight was intense. Conversations online were fast, furious, and unforgiving. People were waiting to see how Drake would respond, not with a statement, but with action. Instead, what came felt more like an effort to preserve rather than repair. And in that preservation instinct, emotion got sidelined by optics. Vulnerability got replaced by image control. And the result was less "I was wrong" and more "I regret being caught." That shift from owning the fault to managing the fallout is subtle, but it's everything. Because the audience doesn't just hold you accountable for what you did. They hold you accountable for how you acted after. And when that act appears self-serving, the trust fracture grows. It's like handing someone a script instead of a letter. They'll read it. They'll feel the absence behind the words. And they'll decide for themselves whether the apology was genuine. Apology was genuine. What makes this even more dramatic is the contrast to what we expect from Drake. We expect introspection, confessional lines, the raw cracks in his persona. We expect him to dig, to hurt, to bleed a little into the MIC. That's the core of his appeal. So, when he flips into this sterile mode of I regret how my words were perceived rather than I regret what I did and how it hurt, it doesn't just feel out of character, it undermines his brand. Because what gave him resonance was transparency. What he delivered was guarded. And the feedback loop kicked in. Social media exploded not in relief but in critique. People broke down the wording, pointed out the omissions, mocked the tone. A single apology meant to extinguish the fire became fuel for a bigger blaze because the message that landed was, "I'm sorry this became public," rather than, "I'm sorry I hurt you." And that difference, it's a chasm. This isn't just about one statement either. It rippled. It changed how people look at future moves. It raised the question, is this man still standing for what he stood for when fans first connected to him? Or has the machinery around him turned that authenticity into calculus? Once those doubts start, they don't vanish easily. They linger in the next verse, the next tweet, the next stance. And momentum matters. In culture, timing is currency. The longer you wait, the colder the response gets. But Drake's moment came after the noise had already crested. That means the apology arrived into a cooler climate where doubts had already settled. It should have been swift, direct, raw. Instead, it came measured, managed, safe. That mismatch created space for people to fill with their own narratives, and they chose the worst-case ones. Let's be clear, the apology was never going to magically erase the original issue, but it could have reframed it. It could have been the pivot. Instead, it became the permanent stain. Because when you don't meet the expectation of integrity, you magnify the infraction. It's not simply he messed up anymore. It's he didn't understand why it mattered. And that reflection cuts deeper, especially when he built his career on being understood. Another layer, community perception. When someone in Drake's position apologizes, it's not just a personal moment. It sends signals. It sets tone. It opens or closes doors. And when the apology appears half-hearted or strategic, it doesn't just reflect on him. It reflects on the ecosystem around him, on the idea of celebrity accountability, on how we believe stars should behave when they've been in the wrong. And when that reflection is tarnished, fans don't just walk away quietly. They talk, they post, they meme. They retract their defense. Headline moments, not the quiet ones, the ones that will be dissected. And when you don't show up accordingly, you risk being defined by the moment rather than your body of work. Now, let's consider why this matters beyond the celebrity bubble. Because this scenario speaks to a larger shift in how audiences engage with culture. We don't just consume art anymore. We consume narrative. We consume persona. And when the persona slips, the art is scrutinized in a different light. For artists like Drake who trade in emotional resonance, authenticity isn't optional. It's essential. And if that base is undermined, the entire structure shakes. So where can he go from here? The honest answer, either he embraces the discomfort, the exposure, the vulnerability, or he risks being seen as orchestrating his brand rather than living it. He can turn this into a moment of growth. Not a PR pivot, but a genuine realignment. He can speak less, show more. He can let the work reflect the apology rather than repeat it in words, because in the end people forgive. But they don't forget what you do next. To wrap this up, the apology didn't simply fail. It became symbolic about accountability, image, power, and expectation. It didn't just pour gasoline on the fire by fueling reaction. It did so by ignoring the deeper embers. It blinked when the crowd expected a flare-up. And now we're left with the aftermath. Not just a statement, but a story. And sometimes in that story, the apology becomes the brand. It's one thing to drop an apology that misses the mark. It's another thing entirely when the fallout of that apology starts to reshape how people view everything you've done and everything you're about to do. That's exactly where Drake is now. The statement wasn't just a fumble. It was a turning point and the aftermath. It's loud, relentless, and far from over. What people are realizing is that the apology didn't close the book. It cracked open chapters people hadn't read in years. Suddenly, old controversies started resurfacing. Past moments that were brushed aside now being reanalyzed through the lens of this new mess. And the conclusion, this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. That's the real problem. When an apology doesn't convince people you've changed, they go digging. They go remembering. And memory on the internet. It's forever. Fans who once defended Drake are now replaying moments they overlooked. Lyrics that used to sound deep now sound manipulative. Interviews that felt charismatic now feel performative. Everything he said is being weighed again. And the scale is tipping hard. That's what a bad apology does. It reopens the wounds. But this time people don't just look at the injury. They trace the weapon and don't think the industry is watching quietly, either. The music world has always moved on ego, alliances, and unspoken rules. But what makes this era different is how public the shifts have become. Artists aren't just choosing sides in silence anymore. They're liking tweets, dropping subliminals, pulling collabs. Some are cutting ties not with statements but with silence, and silence speaks volumes when it's coming from people who used to be on your team. The collaboration landscape is already changing. People are cautious. No one wants to be caught next to a brand in crisis. Not when cultural currency moves this fast. Even producers, background writers, and directors are getting careful because being associated with someone under scrutiny, especially someone who refuses to take full accountability, is a risk. And in today's climate, the wrong cosign can burn you. Not just the person and the fire, but maybe the biggest shift isn't happening in the boardrooms or in the DMs. It's happening in the culture. Fans used to ride hard for Drake because he felt like one of them. Emotional, reflective, messy, but self-aware. Now, for the first time, he feels above it all. Untouchable in the worst way, detached, like he's watching the chaos, not living through it. That disconnect is poison for an artist whose entire appeal is restability. It's wild how fast energy flips. A year ago, people were quoting him like gospel. Now they're dissecting him like a case study and what not to do. That's the internet. It builds you up with memes and breaks you down with the same speed. 1 minute you're a mood, the next you're a cautionary tale. Drake's apology didn't stop the narrative. It sped it up. It didn't show growth. It exposed a ceiling. And the memes, they're ruthless, but they're also a signal. When the jokes start hitting deeper than the interviews, you know you've lost the room. People aren't just laughing at Drake, they're laughing about him. And that's way worse because once the culture decides you're a meme, you stop being the moment. You start being the memory. And the climb back from that is steep. What's even more ironic is that Drake had a chance to flip this. Genuinely, he had the opportunity to be the grown man in a space that rewards immaturity. He could have leaned in, told the whole truth, dropped the ego, and owned every inch of the controversy. Fans would have respected it. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Because growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being real when it counts. And he didn't show up when it counted. He showed up when it was convenient. Even the rollout of the thing about silence is that it's never really silent. Not in this era. Especially not when you're as loud as Drake has been for over a decade. And right now, the silence from other artists, brands, and collaborators is saying more than any diss track or public statement ever could. It's not just shade anymore. It's distance. Strategic, deliberate, calculated distance. Because when a name starts to feel radioactive, everyone close to it has two choices. Stand by it and risk the burn, or walk away and let the fallout settle without them. And people are walking quietly, carefully. You're seeing it in the interviews that don't happen, the features that don't drop, the brands that suddenly go mute. Nobody's coming out to drag Drake directly. That's not how the top tier plays. But the absence, the dodged questions, the politely redirected answers, it's obvious, and it stings worse than a direct call out because it confirms the vibe that's been brewing online. Drake isn't just facing backlash. He's being sidelined. What's wild is how fast this happened. This is the same artist who could drop a single bar on Instagram Live and shift the algorithm. Now it's like the cultural current has shifted and it's dragging him backward. Not because his talent disappeared, not because the music suddenly flopped, but because the narrative flipped. And once that happens, once people stop rooting for you and start watching what you'll mess up next, your every move becomes less powerful. It becomes a test. And right now breaks failing that test. The rollout for his next project, whatever it ends up being, is going to be a minefield. It can't be business as usual. It can't be just another slick drop with a cryptic post, a surprise verse, a teaser trailer shot in some Toronto high-rise. That formula only works when the audience is still invested in the persona. But when the persona feels cracked, when people aren't sure if you even believe what you're selling anymore, the whole machine stutters. Because what's at stake now isn't just streams or chart positions. Drake will always pull numbers. That's not the concern. The real problem is cultural relevance. And cultural relevance is about connection, about resonance, about showing up in ways that matter to the people who once believed you were one of them. That's not something you can fake. You can't buy it. You can't PR your way into it. You earn it through presence, through humility, through growth, through realness and the apology, the fallout. It all screamed the opposite. And while he's scrambling to control the message, other artists are evolving. New voices are rising. New faces are owning the moment. They're showing vulnerability. They're addressing their missteps head-on. They're doing interviews that feel raw, unscripted, messy, but human. And in contrast, Drake's every move feels sterile, sanitized, like he's still trying to sell the myth. Even when the audience has already seen behind the curtain, people can smell when you're more interested in preserving your legend than engaging with your truth. And that scent, it lingers. It sticks to every lyric, every tweet, every silence. Especially when you've built your entire brand on feeling things deeply. Now it feels like he's not feeling anything, just reacting. Playing chess on a board that stopped caring about strategy. That's why the apology didn't land. That's why the silence after it feels so loud, because people were expecting a man and got a brand. And brands can't cry. Brands can't grow. Brands don't apologize. They manage risk. They calculate optics. They do the minimum required to avoid collapse. But fans don't forget. They don't want management. They want meaning. And when they don't get it, they disengage. What's even worse for Drake is that the people who once defended him loudly aggressively are now quiet. That core audience that rode for him during every beef, every accusation, every wild headline. They're not pushing back this time. They're not arguing in the comments. They're not spinning narratives. They single quotes read "gone" or at least waiting. Waiting to see if he finally steps out from behind the mask. Waiting to see if he stops trying to outsmart the moment and just feels it. And let's talk about the music, because eventually that's where this all leads. The next drop will define everything. It can't just be sonically strong. It has to be emotionally correct. There's no more room for vague captions, subliminal bars, or cleverly dodged topics. If he doesn't speak to this, really speak to it, the culture will move on without him. Not out of hate, but out of hunger. Hunger for something real. Drake's always been a master of evolution. He shifted from blog rap softness to trap-infused dominance to melodic pop hooks without missing a beat. But this moment doesn't require sonic evolution. It demands personal evolution, and that's harder because it requires shedding armor. It means making music that might not stream like crazy but might actually rebuild trust. That's the trade-off. And right now the question isn't can he do that? It's will he? Because the safe route is tempting. Drop another hit. Add a feature. Post some vague caption and act unbothered. But the safe route is the one that led him here. And the only way out is through the mess. Through the honesty. Through the kind of album that hurts to write. The kind that makes you uncomfortable. The kind that reintroduces you not as a product but as a person. If he delivers that, if he gives people the unfiltered truth, even if it's ugly, he might win some of them back. Because people don't hate imperfection. They hate dishonesty. They hate arrogance. They hate feeling manipulated. And right now, that's what's sticking to Drake more than any one controversy. The feeling that he doesn't actually care. That everything's just a playbook. That nothing is sacred. Not even his own reputation. But maybe the pressure is finally getting through. Maybe this quiet spell is the storm before the pivot. Maybe we'll get a project where he stops playing the part and starts living the consequences. Where he ditches the calculated cool and finally tells us what it's really been like behind the headlines. If that happens, He has a chance, a real one. Not just to win fans back, but to evolve into the artist people always hoped he could become. But if he doesn't, then this isn't just a pause in his run. It's the beginning of the end. Not in a dramatic flame out, not in a scandal-driven collapse, but in something far worse. Irrelevance. The quiet fade, the cultural shrug, the moment where people stop asking what he'll do next because they've already moved on to someone who gets it. That's the fire the apology ignited. Not just because it was bad, but because it exposed something deeper. It showed us a man unwilling or unable to confront himself. And if he doesn't do that soon, the industry won't wait around. Neither will the fans. The world moves fast. And Drake, he might just be moving in the wrong direction. So, now you've seen the fallout, the fake apology, the silence, the shift, the unraveling of a legacy in real time. Not with a bang, but with a slow, steady collapse that even Drake himself didn't see coming. And if you think this story is over, you're dead wrong, because we haven't even touched the brand deals, the sponsorship whispers, the closed-door meetings, and the quiet power moves happening behind the scenes. We're talking endorsements evaporating, festival slots going cold, collaborations suddenly postponed, and entire campaigns being rewritten without his name. This isn't just about music anymore. It's about survival in a culture that no longer rewards silence or spin. It's about whether Drake has one final pivot left, the kind that could either redefine his career or officially end the myth. You want the truth behind the headlines. The unfiltered story about how the biggest name in hip-hop might be fumbling his own legacy move by move. Then stay locked in, and it's going to expose the real cost of losing the room. The brands, the partners, the media, the money, the image, and maybe the man himself. Share this, post it, quote it, bookmark it. Because when the conversation shifts again, this is no longer about one bad apology. This is a case study in what happens when an empire forgets the people who built it. The king still got the crown, but the throne, it's shaking. The throne, it's shaking.